All right. So today we are joined with Jonathan Reed. Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, first of all. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
I was listening to a couple of your podcasts earlier, actually, and I really like the format. It seems like you've been talking to some really interesting people, and I found myself listening a little bit longer than I was intending to. So I really like what you're doing. Um,
Appreciate that.
yeah, so I guess to keep it simple, I've had my hands in a few areas throughout the past 10 years, but mostly I'm a filmmaker, and I've tried to take those skills into the world of marketing. And so for the past 5 years, I have been helping businesses to get more customers using the power of storytelling. And it's something I'm really fascinated with. When you tell stories in the right way, you can really move people. You can make people feel things and inspire them to be better versions of themselves or, act in certain ways. And it's just really interesting how you can influence people for good with storytelling. And it's just something I've been fascinated in and kind of dedicated my life to.
Can you go a little bit about on how you started filmmaking? Because I did watch your video that you did send me, the trailer of that film. What went behind that film? And can you give the listeners kind of like a background of it?
Yeah, I think you saw the trailer for the documentary we did called Perception from Prison to Purpose.
Yes.
We made that back in 2017, and that one was interesting because I had a friend of mine who ended up being the executive producer who is a life coach, and there was someone he was coaching within the prison system, within the youth prison system, and his name was Noah, and he was just this remarkable person who he went into jail when he was about 17 years old because of a fight he got into with another gang member, and he got 7.5 years as a sentence. And by the time we met up with him, he was about 5 years in, 5 years into that sentence, and he was amazing. He had graduated high school. He had graduated college while he was in there. He had published two books, started a business and a nonprofit, all within those first 5 years.
Oh wow.
It was absolutely remarkable. And so, obviously, we felt we had to tell the story because not only could that be inspiring for others who might have been involved with the criminal justice system, but to people in general, everyone likes to see a great comeback story, right? When you see someone who is in a tough spot and who
Mhm.
changes their life around to be able to achieve something amazing. That's what this guy did, and it was a privilege really to be able to tell that story.
Is this documentary out today, or is it still being produced?
Yeah, so it's completed very much so. We put a lot of work into making sure it was done. We spent probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years on it. But if you'd like to watch it, you can go to YouTube. It is now public. We went through the
Oh,
film festival circuit for quite a while. We won, I think, about eight or so awards. Not exactly, don't quote me on the number, but we won a few awards, and which was really nice. But you can go on YouTube. It's called Perception from Prison to Purpose, and it's about 40 minutes or so. If you have the time, would really appreciate it because we think it's something that can help a lot of people.
yeah, I'll definitely check that out. The trailer looked really intriguing to me, and I was curious on the release date. But what what was kind of your main inspiration for starting to make films?
I had a very lucky conversation with a friend that if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have gotten into all of this. I was literally just at a driving range, like, a golf driving range with an older friend of mine who was kind of a mentor. And I told him about some random idea that I had, just as like, oh, this would be a cool TV show. And he was like, you know what, you should get into film. You'd probably be really good at it. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
And he said, no, you should look into it. I trust me. I think you'll be better at it than you realize. And around that same time, I met up with another friend of mine that I'd known for a while, who was the leader of a nonprofit called The Other Side of Basketball. And he said that he was about to take his a bunch of his kids to Haiti to visit an orphanage over there. And he asked me, hey, do you happen to know anyone who does video or filmmaking? And I had just had this conversation with my friend a few weeks ago, and I'm like, I kind of do that. I'm trying to get into it. And he's like, well, cool, let's have a conversation. And if all works out, yeah, I'd like to take you down to Haiti with us. And so you can, film the experience. And so, long story short, yeah, I went down there. He actually was able to provide me the equipment. So this was the first camera, professional video camera I'd ever owned. And yeah, he took me down there. We were there for 4 days. And we try not to say that it was like a life-changing experience because we don't want that experience to be about us, because it was about what we were doing for this for the kids in the orphanage down there who really needed the help. But it's impossible to not say that because it really does change your perspective. We were in this town called Titanyen, and it was completely destroyed. It was This was after the hurricane had come through there a while back, and it looked like the hurricane had just happened a week ago. There was garbage everywhere. Houses were broken down. There's no electricity anywhere. There's really no clean water. This was like as bad as it can get. And we were in an orphanage right in the middle of all of this, where there's about 20, 30 kids all packed in with this is one little tiny house. And so we were just expecting this to be, a very tough trip. We were trying to help these kids out. They were eating only one meal of rice and beans a day. That's
Oh
how
my god.
bad the situation was. And you would meet kids who looked like they were like 9 or 10 years old, and they would tell you, no, that he's actually 13 or 14. And he just looks like that because, they eat so little, they're not really developing right. And so yeah, we start meeting the kids, and after about an hour or so of them getting comfortable with us, these are the happiest kids you will have ever met in your entire life. They had so much energy. They We were playing soccer with them on this, dirt rocky ground that they were playing on without any shoes. But they were so happy. Like, we were singing, we were playing games, and obviously we don't speak the same language, but we were connecting really deeply with them. And I was just so lucky to be there and able to film that. And when we got back home, I rushed to put like a little trailer together. This is going to end up being another about 40 minute or so documentary. And I put this little trailer together. I sent it to a friend of mine who I went on the trip with, and she texted me that she watched it, and she said, "I'm watching your trailer and I'm halfway through and I'm already in tears."
Oh wow.
And I had never had anyone tell me anything like that before about something I'd created. And right in that moment, I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. That was just such a impactful thing to be able to create something that made someone feel an emotion like that, and to think that, the more people who watch this, if they feel a similar way, maybe we can get them to help out and get involved, and help with this orphanage, help with this nonprofit organization, and continue to grow it. And so from that moment on, I was hooked, and that's all I wanted to do for the rest of my life from there.
First of all, that's amazing, and that is something that I do want to watch because people spreading good around the world is something, a nice bright light of positivity that people need, especially during times like today.
Yeah.
When you first got there, was there like a cultural change that you had to learn, or do you just immerse yourself into the culture to get like the full experience of it?
We try to immerse ourselves as much as we could. Culturally speaking, there was a few things that we had to learn. And for example, when we got into the orphanage, it's polite to actually, when you're new in town, to keep yourself distant from the people who live there so that they can get to know you kind of from a distance, from a safe distance, and just kind of, like, I guess, get your energy to some degree. And so we spent about the first hour kind of on the porch while the kids were kind of out in this other area undercover. And so yeah, there was a few things. We were treated definitely as foreign people. It was interesting to have that experience where you go somewhere where you're the foreign person, and people are definitely looking at you a little suspicious. And people down there are mostly friendly, but still, there's some caution for sure. And but for the most part, we were kind of isolated in one area. We weren't necessarily going through the towns and villages and everything, but we were kind of mostly isolated to this orphanage. So once the kids got comfortable with us, and we got comfortable with the people who were volunteering there, yeah, everything was pretty much good. There wasn't really much to get used to. It was just a really amazing time connecting with these kids.
And you mentioned that they only had one serving of rice and beans a day.
And that was better than what most kids experience. Like, they went through a lot of this organization, nonprofit organization, went through a lot of work to fund this orphanage so that they could have one meal of rice and beans a day. That was a big deal for them.
And I'm just curious, when you were down there, is that also what you ate as well, or?
So we were part of that trip was to partner with another NGO that was down there, and they were able to, by the time we left, get them set up so they can now have 3 meals a day. That was one of the biggest reasons we were there. We wanted to build a water catchment system so they could have purified water, and get them the resources by connecting them with this other organization that could start providing more food for them. And so, yeah, we were not eating very much ourselves. We probably ate maybe 2 or 3 times a day with very, very simple food. But by the time we left, we were able to get them in a situation where they were also able to eat 3 times a day. And now they're doing great. Now they have multiple buildings in that same orphanage. The boys and girls are separated. They're educated. They go to school. Some of them are graduating, going to college. They're in a much better place now since the first time we went.
That's amazing. That's amazing to hear. And when it comes to your filmmaking, do you have like a little strategy that you follow before you make films, or like what's the process of like like making sure that you make something that's impactful and grabs the viewer's attention and builds that emotion?
Yeah, that's something I've been working on for a long time, and it's interesting that art is an interesting thing because people will sometimes feel like it's an expressive medium, right? It's for there's no rules. You just have to express yourself and just do whatever comes naturally to you, and that's kind of a postmodern sort of approach to it. But what I've found the more and more that I've been in this field is that there are certain rules and structures that if you do put them in place, you can still be creative with them, but you end up finding out that almost every book you've ever read, every movie, TV show you've ever watched, all actually have a very similar structure to them that has been refined for hundreds of years, that has proven to be able to keep people engaged and inspire them. And kind of one way of thinking about that is that, if I were to ask you what your favorite movie is, for example, I could basically predict what happens if I'd seen it or not, because I understand that everything that you watch, for the most part, is the same story. And that story is it's about someone who has been forced to change, who probably didn't want to change, but has gone through the journey of having to change and deal with a difficult situation and come out on the other end.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's kind of what I've noticed in a lot of movies too. It's mostly a happy beginning. You live through the life with someone, then a problem happens, difficult problem. It goes through that situation for like a couple minutes or so, and at the end, it's always going to be a happy ending.
Almost always. Sometimes there isn't a happy ending, but there's always a lesson. That's the consistent thing. There's always something that the character learns because people want to be able to feel like they can relate to a character. And when they can relate to them based on a shared struggle, that's when you really connect with the character or with the movie. And at the end, they may be successful. Usually, they are about 80% of the time, there's a happy ending. But even when there isn't, there's generally some kind of lesson that's learned or a skill that is learned, or some sort of character development that happens that helps you realize, okay, they may not have gotten exactly what they wanted, but they are now better prepared to handle things that might come up in the future. And I think that's where you really connect with people and inspire them, that says, okay, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But why is it that bad endings or not happy endings are such like an uncommon thing, do you think?
People want to escape their real life, usually when they're engaging with certain types of entertainment, with most types of entertainment, and they don't want to be reminded that you can fail because we experience failure all the time, and it's difficult to deal with. But when you watch a movie that says, "Hey, this person is struggling just like you're struggling, and everything is okay at the end," that's a message that a lot of us need. It's really interesting how powerful this simple phrase of "everything's going to be okay" is a very powerful phrase that people don't hear a lot. You might have heard it when you were younger with your parents, but people don't get reassurance a lot in their day-to-day life from the people that they're around. There's very few times that people get the specific, like someone's telling you directly, "Hey, everything's going to be okay," or "Hey, I'm proud of you," or "Hey, like you should feel confident, you're a good person." And movies give us a chance to hear those messages, either usually indirectly through a character that we relate to. But yeah, we want to be able to feel good, and there's some movies that their job is not to make you feel good, it's to make you think or just experience something interesting. But I think for the most part, to answer your question, is yeah, people want to feel good, and I think most movies are made around that intention.
Do you think there's some cons to that type of method of like trying to always enforce that everything's going to be happy.
There is a disconnect, isn't there, when you're constantly getting a message of positivity, optimism, everything's going to be okay. You can get through. I mean, one thing a lot of movies do is that usually at towards the climax, the your hero is at the worst spot they can possibly be, and it looks like there's no escape. And if it's a superhero movie, they're about to die or whatever the case is, and then some sudden random coincidence happens and everything is okay, and a building falls on the bad guy, and the superhero wins. Just something random will happen. And yeah, that might have the case of, hey, even when things seem bad, you never know what can happen. I think there's a disconnect when we learn that that message isn't necessarily realistic, and when we go through tough things and realize there's no one there to save us, and things may not always go our way. So I think we little by little stop connecting to those movies and those messages because we learn that's just not really how life goes. And yeah, so I don't know if there's a bad influence from that, but there's definitely a disconnect that happens, which is why I recommend people expand their horizons a little bit when it comes to entertainment. Watch some indie films, watch some films from foreign countries. Get a larger perspective, or start reading books. Reading books is kind of not something that we're really doing consistently anymore like we used to. Maybe 50, 60 years ago. But yeah, expand your horizons with entertainment a little bit, because when you get all perspectives, I think it helps kind of create a well-rounded person when it comes to entertainment.
And then shifting the topic right now, I know that when we were talking on Reddit, you did mention how you had ambitious dreams when you were young, but they were stripped away from you. Um, are you comfortable talking with this? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can
Okay,
use
yeah,
my story to help, absolutely.
yeah. Could you walk us through that and tell us more about it?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was listening to something from Tony Robbins recently where he says you're defined by the stories you tell yourself. And there's a story that I consistently tell myself, which is that by the time I was about 18 years old, I was 1 year away. I'd already graduated high school, and I was a year away from getting my bachelor's degree early. And I was working, I was going to school full time, I was playing golf competitively, I was really interested in music, I had a great social life. I was happy. I had a lot of energy. I was very capable, extremely ambitious. I wanted to travel the world in my 20s. I wanted to start a family and retire by the time I was 29. That might have been a little, far fetched, but at the time, again, I was just very ambitious. I thought I could accomplish anything. And there was a very specific moment where I remember I was walking back to my truck from class, and I got in, sat down, I closed the door, and then something just hit me, and all of my energy was gone. And it was so startling and so strange that I called the doctor, and after being on hold for some time, I told him, like, hey, I'm just extremely fatigued. And they're like, oh no, fatigue is a whole different thing. No, you're probably fine. I said, no, this is really strange. And they're like, oh, do you have finals coming up? I guess, yeah, they're coming up soon. Like, oh, you're probably just stressed. Like, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. And it's okay. I just let it go. And within the next 6 months, I had quit my job. I had dropped out of school, stopped playing golf, wasn't really hanging out with my friends anymore, and I was basically just isolating myself in my room unintentionally. And what I learned a little bit after that is that mental health issues run in my family on both sides, and it was my turn. And so I was dealing with some things, depression for one, which was very severe, clinical hormonal problem. I wasn't going through anything in my life that would cause it, so it wasn't like trauma. It wasn't the blues. It was real chemical imbalance depression. And from that moment on, these past 10 years have just been a constant fight, a constant struggle of trying to push through that, because it doesn't really go away. You can learn to cope with it, but it doesn't go away. And yeah, that's been really tough. So all those goals that I mentioned earlier, I accomplished zero of them. And that's been even probably the tougher part. I don't mind if I'm dealing with things, but I want to be able to. I'm an ambitious person, so when you don't meet your high standards, man, that's a real psychological struggle, and it makes you kind of see yourself differently, and it affects your confidence. But I've had to teach myself to change my expectations a little bit, and I think what I've really done is, there's a quote from Zig Ziglar who says, you can get everything in life that you want if you can help just enough other people get what they want. And so the strategy I've been really using the past few years is let's take the focus off myself a little bit, and let's just help people as much as I possibly can, and trust in that strategy and say that if I keep on doing that, it'll help escalate me to a level to where I can eventually get those things too. So I just turned 32 days ago. So
Happy birthday.
thank you.
Belated birthday.
Yeah. So I officially did not hit those goals in my 20s. I'm not retired, but I'm not giving up at the same time. And even though the mental health stuff is tough, it just gives me more to fight through and more pride and confidence when I'm able to do so.
That's an amazing story, and it's amazing to hear how you didn't let one problem in life just bring you down and just restrict you from everything. I think it's great what you're doing right now. I can definitely relate because I also am a very ambitious person like you, and I put high expectations for myself too, which I can see where it can be very bad for you because if you want to do everything to the highest level and you don't achieve it, even if you're doing it at like a average semi good level, it still is not enough for you.
Yeah.
And I think I also was at one point where it did kind of affect me too, and that is when I also pivoted like you to want to help and inspire people. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do with my podcast and blog, and just kind of change who I am, just to shift away from myself and
Yeah.
focusing on other people. And I can definitely say that it when you have people coming to you saying that what you posted online really helped me out, or what you're doing is really great, that is everything that can, like, that's everything to me. Like, that makes me feel good. That makes me feel kind of like validated, I
Yeah.
want to say.
Yeah, that's
And
such a different thing, isn't it? When a stranger, especially when someone you don't know interacts with something that you've done, and they're like, "Wow, that was like, thank you so much, like that made my day, or that helped me to some degree." Isn't that such a crazy experience?
it's a very crazy experience. It like whenever I get compliments on, well, for me, I can't really accept compliments because like it's just it's just an awkward feeling for me, and I
Yeah,
never know what to say back. But whenever people do say like that I've helped them throughout their day, or I help them throughout this problem in their life, whether it be fitness or anything, it just brings a tear to my eye and just makes me really emotional.
yeah.
So is this kind of what also inspired you to do filmmaking about positive situations, while trying to spread positivity?
Right. That's basically the goal with just about every project that I get involved with. I just think it's really important when we talked about the message of positivity and optimism is important. I try to be a little bit more careful with it so that it's not just again everything's a happy ending at the end, but there's always a takeaway that proves to people. I like to tell people you're more capable than you think. That you can accomplish more than you know, and that you're already qualified. A lot of this is messaging that I got from my friend Noah, who we did the documentary about, and it's just such a powerful message that that's the takeaway I want people to get. If there's a happy ending or not, that's the most important part, is that you understand that you're capable of handling anything that happens, and to use those abilities to help others. Because there's if you had to answer the question, what's our purpose in life, I think there's a clear answer to that, which is help others.
Hmm.
Because at the
I agree.
very Yeah, because at the very minimum, there's very few things that feel better, that make you feel happier, more fulfilled, than when you truly help somebody. And regardless if they say thank you or not, or if they appreciate it or not, when you know that you've really helped somebody and you can see the difference in their life, there's I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, there's very few things that can make you feel more satisfied than that, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree.
So yeah, that's what I'm trying to dedicate my life to. With the big projects that I get involved with the little things that I do, there's usually some theme of trying my best to help people, and not just in general, because a lot of people say that that's what they want to do, and that's true. But I've done the best I can to be well researched, so that when someone is struggling with something, I try to have like a formula or something I can fall back on and say, do these three things, or try this specific strategy or whatever the case may be. So I try to my best to really be able to be as helpful as I can instead of just helping in general, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. And going back on what you said about like telling people that they have a purpose and that they are unique in a sense, I think it's kind of a I think everyone has their own method of solving a problem, which is very nice because I feel like a lot of people only rely on Google and only
Yes.
stay on the first page of the results because you want that instant solution, and which is going to be the most cliche solution.
Yeah.
But I think everyone has their own way of dealing with situations in life, which is very helpful to spread to other people because everyone is not gonna like use one technique to solve a problem because some of it may not match up with what they believe in or what they want to do.
Right. Everyone is different and is going to relate or be helped by different things, and that's totally true. I just think that there's very specific sciences that people aren't aware of, that if they were made aware, it it can help people leap forward at a much faster rate. So for example, are you familiar with Simon Sinek and his TED Talk Start With Why?
Simon Sinek, I think I am. Does this may be really vague, but does he wear glasses by any
He does
chance?
wear glasses, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I
Must be
see
the
him
same
on
guy.
Facebook, and he's always talking about millennials or
Yeah,
something.
he had a really famous video about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
The thing that he's the most famous for is creating a concept called Start With Why. And the whole thing is based off of the biological concept that we interpret things emotionally first and logically second. So every decision that you've made, even though you might feel like or think that it's a logical one, it went through your neocortex, which is responsible for emotions and decision making, and doesn't comprehend language. So when you have like a gut feeling that just something seems right or seems wrong, it's because it's that primal part of you that just feels the situation, and then you rationalize it with your frontal lobe. That makes you kind of put those two things together. But where I'm coming with this is that he says that when people make decisions, they start with why. Like, why should I do this? Like, what's the bigger purpose or reason? And then what is it? So when you're making a purchase decision, let's say you're trying to find a personal trainer, or let's say you're trying to find a specific brand of clothing. If they believe what you believe when it comes to things that are way bigger than their product, like if you're someone who believes strongly in sustainability or in the environment, and this brand is saying, hey, we believe in the same thing, you're going to buy that shirt, even if you see a nicer shirt next to it, because they believe what you believe. So, starting with why is telling people what you believe and attracting those who believe the same thing, who share a common cause or purpose. And the way you break it down specifically is he helps you create a why statement that's in this very specific in this very specific structure, which is to contribute, and you have to figure out what is the best way you contribute so that you can have a specific impact. And so you'll fill in those blanks with contribution and impact. So you go through this very specific process that's very involved. So you can go through stories of your life to find out what are the areas that you've best been able to help people in, and what was the impact that when you're able to help someone, what was the impact that had on other people's lives. And so, like for example, mine was something along the lines of to lead with love so that people know that their life matters. And being able to know that structure, like being able to read a book within a weekend and do that process the next week, gave me my life's purpose. Now that's something that people usually find years of wandering and traveling and thinking and talking and pondering to try to figure out what their purpose is. I figured it out in a weekend because I knew a specific structure that psychologically could technically work for everyone. And so, yeah, I 100% agree that everybody is different. So, like, everybody's why their structure will be different than everybody else's. But that structure is really important because just like storytelling, or just like business, or just like fitness, or many things in health, there's things that are unique and individualized, but there's certain structures that everybody has to keep to, because that's going to be what helps them get to where they're really trying to get to in a much faster way.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think I'm going to actually ask myself this question tonight and think about this because I talk to a lot of people and people are still always curious of like I still don't know my direct purpose,
Yeah.
and for that it's just hard to answer that question and like kind of give good guidance on that.
Yeah, it's
Except
actually
to
it's actually what I do for a living now. That's part of so when it comes to the marketing that I do, it's a very different approach. I run a business called Care Branding, and it's all about not just doing like visual branding, like logos or web redesigns, but I actually help people come up with their messaging and their identity and their who are they? How is it that they can best connect with their customers? And the first step I do with every client was we have to find your why first. What is your purpose behind everything that we're doing, completely unrelated from your business or product, so we can understand how to make sure you stay motivated and how to keep people connected to you who have a similar cause or purpose or belief. And so the process that I did for myself, just like a lot of things, if I find that something's worked for me, I try to turn that into something that I can use for others. And yeah, that's what I do for a living now. It's the first step of every client I work with. We help them find their why.
interesting. And you said that you transitioned to marketing, right?
Yeah, that's the easiest way to define it. Yeah, that's basically
Did,
what I'm into now.
did you did you take a lot of aspects from filmmaking and did it make marketing easier when you transferred those skills from like filmmaking to marketing? Because I feel like they kind of go hand in hand because for marketing you want to kind of like gauge your audience or
Right.
the viewer.
Marketing and storytelling are both about the exact same thing. It's uh, pain and desire. So you have a problem, you want to fix it. That's both movies and any type of advertising you've ever seen. And so, yeah, being able to combine those two things, I believe, has been helpful because it helps us to understand that, the second part of the process that I take my clients through is okay, we now need to do interviews with customers or potential customers and ask them a specific set of questions so we can understand what are their pain points, what are the biggest problems in their lives, and then what are the biggest goals that they have. And then now our whole marketing is just centered around helping them understand that we know what they're going through. We know what your pain is. We know what you want. Here's a product that can help provide that to you. And so, yeah, I think that's storytelling and marketing is essentially the same thing, just kind of a condensed version of it.
I'm about to wrap up here. Is
Yeah.
there anything else that you would want to touch on topic wise?
Yeah, no, I think that's it for the most part. Yeah, I would just encourage people to look up Simon Sinek's book. It's called Start with Why. I think that's something that could help everybody. He has a follow up book called Find Your Why, so you can go through that process I was talking about. And if it's something anyone would like more help with specifically, you can always reach out to me, and I can do the best I can to help out as well, or help you find resources.
Where can people find you, or where can people watch your films that you've made?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, it's jonathanmreed.com. Reed is two E's. And I have most of my projects on there, and you can learn about what I do. My Instagram is the same thing, Jonathan M. Reed underscore stories. And you can see, my posts and kind of updates about the projects that I'm doing. And like I said, my whole thing is I technically run a business, but I help people over everything. So if someone says, "Hey, I need this help, but I can't afford it," I'll figure out a way to help them anyway. That's my number one priority, and that's where my fulfillment comes from. So yeah, if anyone would love to reach out, if anyone would like to reach out, I'd love to help however I can.
That's awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on on my podcast. You have a amazing story and amazing films, and I can't wait to watch the full versions of the trailer that you provided me.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much for having me on and giving me a chance to tell my story. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Hey, hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for all your health and fitness needs, visit betterhealthieryou.com. You spell is in YU. Don't forget, every Monday, new episode of The More You Know, more education, the better. And lately, I haven't been uploading a Focus Friday because life has been in the way and I haven't had anything interesting happen. But I promise that we will get back to our normal schedule very soon. I'm predicting this week. Hope you guys had an amazing weekend and you guys have an amazing week. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys later.